Hey there, this is Mark. In this video we'll take a look at how to add a glow to the top of the lamppost as well as modifying the way the beam is shown. So if I zoom it into the lamppost over here, and I can turn it on and off in the node view to make sure that's the one. Yep, and I can see that everything is in one piece. So what I'd actually like to do is I'd like to have these glowing parts just kind of bloom a little more and be a little brighter. In order to do that, I need a mat to determine those areas. So what I'll first do is I'll create a new drawing, and we can do that by hitting Control R on our keyboard if you're on a PC, or Command R on a Mac. And I'm going to type in the name of my mat and call this Glow Mat. Press Add and Close. And I'm going to drag that to the left side, and then I'll drag the peg to make sure that it's connected to the exact same information as my background. If my background moves, I want this mat to move along with it. Now I'll drop this from the mat and connect it to my bottom composite on top of my background layers. Now what we're going to use to draw the mat is the polyline tool. If we look down over here, we have our line tool, and the little white arrow shows that we have more tools inside. So if we click and hold, we can select down to the polyline. Next, in my tool properties, I can see that the options for the line are right here. I'll just scroll down over here and I'll look at these two options. So this one says autofill, which means that if I close off my shape, it'll automatically fill it with a color. And this one says trim the extra lines, which means that if I go beyond the edge of my shape, it'll trim off the extra stranded lines. So we'll turn these both on. And then I'll go to my color, and I want to have a palette in here that I can paint with. So what I'll do is I'll create a new palette. And I'll call this Comp. Press OK. Down here we have a swatch for our new palette, and I like to leave the default as is. So I'll create a new swatch, and we'll call this Matte. Doesn't matter what color you make it, I leave it black. Just for fun, let's make it another color, so let's just do red. And we'll double click the swatch to change the color, and just simply pick a red. So now we have two colors, and we see that we have the polyline tool, and we have these options here where we can choose if we paint both the line and the fill with the same color, pencil line or brush. So I know that I want my fill to be, say, black. I'll make sure that this is unchecked first to unlink them, and then I'll make my pencil red and my brush red. That looks interesting enough. Then I'll go up here and I'll start to draw so that we'll go back into our node view, make sure that we have our glow mat selected, and then we're on frame 1. And then we can click to create our shape. And if you'd like to do a curve, you can click and drag, which will get you the tangents. And a simple click just has no tangents. So it'll give you a sharp edge. And then we can click and drag again, click. So what we want to do is go beyond the edge of our line. And make sure you don't click up here, otherwise you're going to be above the shape, keeping it open. Make sure you're crossing that line to close off the shape. And when you're done your shape, you can hold Control and click somewhere, and what that will do is it'll tell Harmony you've finished the drawing, and that'll chop off the excess lines and fill the inside. Now we can see the red line and the black fill. And if you've made a mistake, don't worry about it. We can go back and tidy them up later with the white arrow, which is your contour editor. So next, just start clicking again. Keep doing all your shapes up here. Control click to finish off your shapes. We'll do that for this one. And Control click. And this one here. Okay, now that we have our 4 shapes, we're going to want to get rid of these red lines, as it's extra information that goes beyond what we need. So I'm going to switch to my drawing view. If you don't see anything in here, you can either hit Shift M, or you can start moving around and scrolling out to zoom out. You'll eventually find it. So using my select tool, I'll go back up here, and I like to be in marquee mode when I'm selecting my lines, which allows me to select the entire line. So I'll do that, and then hit delete on my keyboard, and that gets rid of each line. Now I have single shapes which are easy to manage, and in here we can see the results we have. So here's how you can do your tidying. You can select the white arrow. Since we painted on the line art, make sure that that's the art layer we have selected here. Otherwise we won't be able to select our art. And then you can simply click and drag your points until you're satisfied with the shape that you have. So this is good enough and loose. It's just meant to be a mat that's going to be selecting the color behind it, so we can have this basic shape. I'm going to disconnect this now so we can look back at our original lamppost. And what I want to do is I want to wire the lamppost in a second time, but only using this shape. So what I'll do is I'll go to my node library, I'll find a cutter, and we can find it in our favorites if we go over here, cutter. Now I don't want to cut it by the shape, I want to isolate it. So I'm going to reverse this to an inverted cutter. We can either do that by double clicking the icon, or you can also just make sure that it's checked inside the layer properties. Next I'll drag this in the image port, and I'll drag my shape into the matte port. Then I can drag the output to the top of the composite. So if we want to see the results, all we have to do is we can simply add a display, and you have a display node in your favorites, or the shortcut is Control-Y on a PC or Command-Y on a Macintosh. And I'll drag this down, and to see it, I switch down to display 1. So now you can see that we've isolated the interior of the lamppost to our glow matte shape. Let's go back to our regular display. Now the last thing we want to do before we make it glow is to go back into our timeline, and we'll select the glow matte in the node view, and to find it in the timeline we simply hit O, and that'll go straight to it. And we can see we only have it for a single frame, so if we go to the end, make sure that it lasts the entire time by hitting F5. That extends the exposure. Next thing we want to do is add our glow node. So I'll go down to the filter down here, and I can either find it in here, or I can simply type it in and then drag that in. So if we look at our OpenGL, we can see that something is reacting. And now if we render that, it's nice, but it's kind of just a white shape with a harsh edge. So what I want to do is click the layer properties, and we're going to make sure that use source color is checked on. What that does is basically says, okay, whatever color you've given me, which in this case is the actual gradient in the lamppost, you're going to use that to make the glow. So click that, and you can't really see much of a change until we add a bit of radius. And we're going to make this glow maybe a 5. Now we have the original colors glowing by themselves and blurring a little bit, so it's kind of creating a bloom, and that looks really nice. So the next step we want to do is simply feather off this hard beam. We're going to go back up here and try to find our beam. And there you have it. So this is the layer we want to change. What I'd like to do is just blur it a tiny bit. So I'll find a blur. If I go to my filter, and I have all my blurs up here, and I'll select the blur radial this time and attach that over here. And I'll go and make this a radius of 1. Now we see that we have a slightly more feathered blur, and it still trails off nicely, and that looks fairly nice. And we're ready for our next step in the next video.